He always joked that he'd marry me if I could play the violin. He thought it was an impossible running gag between us. But for the last year, I've had a secret. A secret that involved calloused fingers, a cramped shoulder, and a lie I had to tell every Tuesday and Thursday night. He thought it was just a cute little impossibility that defined our relationship. He had no idea I was about to call his bluff in the most public way possible. He told me, "Play the violin and I'll marry you." He was joking, but he's about to find out I wasn't. It all started on a Tuesday night over takeout noodles, which is where most of the defining moments in our relationship seem to happen. My lamb, with his easy laugh and the way his eyes crinkle at the corners, was scrolling through his phone when he suddenly stopped. He showed me a video of a flash mob proposal with a full string quartet playing some big, romantic, classical piece. A huge grin was plastered on his face. "See? That's how you do it. Go big or go home." I laughed and leaned my head on his shoulder. "Are you taking notes?" I nudged him. He locked his phone, turned to me, and with all the mock seriousness a guy holding chopsticks could manage, he said, "You know, I drop to one knee right now if you could just play something like that. Anything. Play me a song on the violin, Sarah, and I'll marry you on the spot." He laughed. I laughed along with him. It was a joke. The violin is famously one of the hardest instruments to learn. It takes a childhood of dedication, not a whim from a 28-year-old marketing manager. The absurdity was the whole point. For him, it was just a throwaway line, a bit of romantic exaggeration. But for me, in the quiet moment after we stopped laughing, a little seed was planted, a wild, audacious, completely unhinged seed. What if I actually did it? What if the punchline to his joke was a diamond ring? Later that night, I opened the Notes app on my phone and typed just one sentence: "Learn to play the violin." Making that decision felt like stepping off a cliff. The first hurdle wasn't even the violin itself. It was the logistics. How do you buy a violin without your live-in partner noticing? I spent a week secretly researching on my laptop, always angling the screen away from him and clearing my search history like a spy. I was learning a whole new language about student models, tone woods, and bows. I finally found a shop across town I knew he'd never set foot in. I told him I was meeting an old college friend for lunch. The lie felt like ash in my mouth, but I knew it was the first of many. Walking into that violin shop was more intimidating than any job interview I've ever had. It smelled like old wood and rosin, and violins in every shade of honey and amber hung on the walls like sleeping birds. A kind, elderly man with a cloud of white hair asked if he could help. I felt like a total fraud. "I want to learn," I stammered. I was braced for him to be judgmental. You know how music communities can sometimes be with adult beginners. Instead, he just smiled. "It's never too late to bring more music into the world," he said. "What's the goal?" I almost told him the whole crazy story, but I couldn't. "It's a personal project," I said. I left with a student violin, a beginner's book, and the name of a teacher, a woman named Mrs. Petrova. The whole thing ate up a big chunk of my personal savings, money I was supposed to be putting aside for a vacation. But walking to my car, the weight of the case in my hand didn't feel like a loss. It felt like an investment, a down payment on our future. My first lesson with Mrs. Petrova was humbling. She was a stern, no-nonsense Russian woman whose apartment smelled of tea and discipline. She made me just stand in front of a mirror for 20 minutes, holding the violin and bow while she corrected my posture. No, she'd say, her accent sharp. "Your wrist is collapsing. Your shoulder is tense. You hold it like a bag of potatoes. This is not potatoes, dear. This is your voice." The first sounds I made weren't music. They were the sounds of a dying cat. It was a screeching, scratching, awful noise. It's tough when you're an adult used to being competent at things, and suddenly you're failing so profoundly. Here I was, good at my job, and I couldn't even draw a bow across a string without making a sound that would scare small children. Mrs. Petrova didn't even flinch. She said, "This is normal. You think Heifetz came from womb playing Paganini? No, he sounded like this. Now, again." The next year of my life became a masterclass in deception. My entire week was built around lies. The lessons with Mrs. Petrova twice a week were disguised as a new yoga class. "It's this new hot yoga place. You'd hate it. It's so stuffy," I'd say as I grabbed a gym bag that secretly held my violin. But practice was the hardest part. I couldn't do it at home, so my car became my studio. During my lunch breaks, I'd drive to the most deserted corner of a local park, wedged between a forgotten baseball field and some trees. And there, with the windows rolled up, I would practice. Scales, bowing exercises, simple, painfully slow children's songs. The frustration was overwhelming. Some days, I'd just sit in my car and cry, with the violin on the passenger seat mocking me. My progress felt glacial. As an adult, you expect to pick things up quickly, and the disappointment when you don't is crushing. My fingers were clumsy and stiff. The muscle memory everyone talks about felt like a total myth. My body, so used to sitting at a desk, ached in new and interesting ways. My left fingertips grew hard, painful calluses, and my neck and shoulder were constantly tense. I nearly gave up more than once. I'd have a terrible practice session where every single note was out of tune, and I think, "This is insane. It's a joke. Just stop." But then I think of Liam's face and his laugh that night. His joke was a challenge, but underneath was a truth. He loved grand, romantic gestures. And what was grander than mastering an impossible instrument just to answer a question he'd probably forgotten asking? His joke became my fuel. The lies just kept piling up. There were some close calls too. One afternoon, Liam came home from work early while I was trying to quietly practice in the spare room with a heavy rubber mute on the violin. He heard a faint squeaking. "What is that?" he called out. "Is there a mouse in here?" My heart hammered against my ribs. "It's the new printer," I yelled back, my mind racing. "It's making a weird calibrating noise." I shoved the violin under the bed, my hands shaking. The guilt was always there, but the sense of purpose was bigger. Slowly, painfully, the screeching started to soften. The dying cat started to sound more like a slightly annoyed cat. About 6 months in, I played a recognizable Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. I just sat in my car and laughed, a mix of pure relief and disbelief. Even Mrs. Petrova noticed. "Less potatoes," she grunted during a lesson. "Maybe small potatoes." Coming from her, that was the highest praise imaginable. I moved on from nursery rhymes, and then I started to think about the song. The song had to be perfect. It couldn't just be any song. It had to be our song. The performance needed to be more than just me showing off a new skill. It had to take him back to a specific moment in our history. For us, that song was 1,000 Years by Christina Perri. I know it's cliche, it's a staple at weddings, but it was personal for us. We saw the movie it was in on our 3rd date, both of us pretending we were too cool for it. But when that song played during the wedding scene, we both went quiet. I remember looking over at him in the dark theater, and he was already looking at me. In that shared moment, something shifted. It was the first time I thought, "Oh, this could be it." We never really talked about it, but it became our unspoken anthem. It was the soundtrack to our beginning. Telling Mrs. Petrova I wanted to learn it was a battle. "Pop music," she scoffed, waving her hand dismissively. "Sentimental nonsense. Chords aren't for guitars." But I insisted. I brought her the sheet music, and she looked it over with a deep sigh. "Fine," she said, "but we do it properly. We will make it sound like music, not like ringtone." Learning that song felt like the final boss of my secret mission. It was a whole new level of difficult, with string crossings and hand position shifts that felt impossible. But this time, the frustration was different. It was mixed with excitement. Every time I nailed a passage, every time the melody started to actually emerge from the mess of notes, my heart soared. I wasn't just learning a song, I was crafting the key to a door I desperately wanted to open. The day I finally played it all the way through without a major mistake, I recorded it on my phone. I sat in my car, listening back, and for the first time, it sounded like real music. It sounded like my voice just singing through the strings. I sent the recording to Mrs. Petrova. Her reply was a single word: acceptable. I cried, not from frustration, but from pure joy. Now, all I had to do was plan the performance. I chose a beautiful public garden with a stone gazebo, the place where we'd had one of our first I love you conversations. I told him a photographer friend needed a couple to pose for a portfolio shoot. He grumbled about getting dressed up, but he agreed. He had no idea he was getting ready for his own proposal. The day of the photo shoot arrived, bright and crisp, and my stomach was in knots. The violin was hidden in my friend's camera bag. She met us at the garden entrance and led us toward the gazebo. Liam was being his usual charming, goofy self, cracking jokes, completely clueless. He thought this was for her. This was all for him. When we got to the gazebo, the photographer said, "Okay, Liam, I want you to stand right here in the center. Sarah, I'm just gonna grab a different lens. I have a little surprise for the shoot." Liam stood there, hands in his pockets, looking handsome and slightly bored. My friend walked away and came back, not with the lens, but with the black violin case. She handed it to me. I turned to face Liam. The look on his face was just pure confusion. His brow furrowed. "What's this?" he asked, a nervous laugh in his voice. "Is this a prop? Am I supposed to pretend to play this?" I didn't say a word. My hands were trembling as I unlatched the case and lifted out the violin. I saw his eyes go wide. The confusion was quickly turning into disbelief, then shock. He took a half step back, his mouth hanging open. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice cracking, "what are you doing?" I tucked the violin under my chin, the way Mrs. Petrova had drilled into me for over a year. I took a deep breath, smelling the late-season roses. I raised the bow, and the whole world just seemed to go silent. It was just me, him, and the dare that had taken on a life of its own. And then I played. The first few notes of 1,000 years trembled in the air, but they were clear and full. It wasn't perfect. I'm sure Mrs. Petrova would have found a dozen things wrong, but it was mine. It was real. I kept my eyes locked on Liam and watched the shock on his face melt away, replaced by a wave of pure understanding. His eyes filled with tears. He brought one hand up to cover his mouth, his shoulders shaking. Every note I played told him the story of the last year, the secret purchase, the screeching in my car, the lies, the guilt, the joy of finally getting it right. It was a year of struggle and love, all poured into a 3-minute song. As I played the final soaring notes, a tear rolled down his cheek. He wasn't even trying to wipe them away. He was just watching me with this beautiful, heartbreaking mix of awe and profound love. When the last note faded, the silence was deafening. I lowered the bow, my heart pounding in my throat. He stared at me for a long moment. Then, without a word, he slowly dropped to one knee. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box I had no idea existed. "Sarah," he started, his voice thick with emotion. I don't even know what to say. "This was a joke, a stupid, silly joke." He let out a wet laugh, shaking his head in disbelief. "But you did this for a joke, for me." He opened the box, revealing a simple, elegant ring that took my breath away. "You played the violin," he said, his voice breaking. "So I guess I have to marry you." I was crying and laughing all at once. "Yes," I said, "yes, you do." He slid the ring on my finger, and I dropped the violin into its case and fell into his arms. The joke was over. Our real story was just beginning. It turns out, sometimes the most ridiculous dares lead to the most beautiful places. My grand, impossible secret symphony ended with the sweetest, most perfect single note. Yes. Thank you so much for watching our story. If you've ever done something crazy for love, we'd love to hear about it in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about how life's little jokes can turn into its greatest adventures.